This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to ceu@iida.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to ceu@iida.org. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IIDA's webinar series, Collective Design. I'm Cheryl Durst, the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of Collective Design, where we are talking about design equity in action, growing our education pipelines. We know that nurturing and developing younger students is truly key to achieving diversity in our profession and in our industry. So this afternoon, we're going to take a look at how designers and firms and organizations and entities are developing pipelines and breaking barriers and exploring community and the way that new education pipelines can grow. So let's jump right in, and I will introduce this incredible panel, group of guests, group of friends. Joining us today is Sam Aquilano, who is the founder and executive director of Design Museum Everywhere. Hey, Sam. We also have Maya Bird Murphy, who is the founder and executive director of Chicago Mobile Makers. Hi, Maya. And we have Dr. Angelita Scott, who is the assistant professor of interior design at Georgia Southern University. Dr. Angie is also the educator and director and community concept lead standard development team at the International Well Building Institute. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
All right. Hey
Hello.
there. How is everybody this afternoon?
Great.
Good. We've got a great audience who are all very interested in hearing from you. And why don't we just start with a little bit of background? I gave the briefest of introductions, your name and titles, but I would love for each of you to talk a little bit about your organizations and your role in those organizations. And let's go ahead and invoke Pipeline and how you all are supporting Pipeline in your roles. Let's go alphabetically and start with you, Sam.
All right. Yeah, happy to. And thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and learn right along with the audience. So I'm the founder and executive director of Design Museum Everywhere. So I started the Design Museum 12 years ago with this wild idea to start a new museum. We're a museum without a home on purpose because design is everywhere. So the museum is also everywhere. We pop up with exhibitions, events. We have a magazine, all about making design accessible. And I guess that's probably how we most plug into this pipeline conversation is by making design accessible, particularly to youth who are looking to learn more about design and engage. And I think the best analogy is a science museum, right? You're gonna go to a science museum and learn about gravity and electromagnetism in a really cool, accessible place where you don't have to be a scientist. And so Design Museum is sort of that for design, of a place where you don't have to be a designer to engage in our exhibits, come to our events, read our materials, listen to our podcast. And it's just a way to kind of get people engaged and excited about design in a really fun way.
Fantastic. I think you just got us all very excited about Design Museum Everywhere. Thank you. And Maya, talk to us about Chicago Mobile Makers. You're in the news a lot. I think we hear about mobile makers a lot, but for our audience, can you kind of explain what Mobile Makers is and how it got started?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everybody. I'm Maya Bird Murphy. I'm the founder and executive director of Chicago Mobile Makers. We started almost 4 years ago. We go around Chicago communities and do design thinking and problem solving workshops for mostly youth. We also do a little bit of community engagement with adults as well. We are also making design more accessible to everyone by usually going to the community or going to the young person instead of having them come to us. And so we are literally bringing design education to communities. We meet young people exactly where they are. Last summer, we converted a mail truck, as a USPS mail truck, into a mobile design studio. And you might have seen photos of this, but we are driving to different communities, stopping in different intersections, and doing pop-ups. So we do a lot of different fun activities that show young people really what design is, but we're really just trying to expose young people to really the basic concepts of design thinking and problem solving.
And what was your catalyst, Maya? How did you start this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it was partially that I was traveling down this traditional path and realized that it wasn't exactly for me. And so I started looking outside to more design adjacent careers and realized that there's really this gap in design education. And I realized that I had a real interest in thinking about design education and bringing design to really to just normal people. And that's how I started it.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And Dr. Angie, so you are both a professor of interior design, and now you have this new role with the Well Building Institute. Can you talk a little bit about the collision of the two?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yes, I have a few hats that I wear. So I am now an adjunct professor at Georgia Southern University. I recently left as a full-time assistant professor in January and went over to IWBI where I'm at now. But I'm still teaching. I still taught a class this semester and still open to teaching, classes as an adjunct in the future. But in the role as a professor, really, I never really understood the importance of me just being in a classroom, showing up with who I am, my skin color, me being, and bringing to light the different or the social justice pieces that I always brought to my students around design and how space can affect us socially, thinking about inclusive design and thinking about universal design. In that role, I really wanted to make sure that other students of color succeeded. I wanted to make sure that they were seen and heard. So in that space, I went out of my way to make sure that happened. I remember being one of the only in my interior design program when I was in school. And then also exposing them to different resources that they don't typically see in their curriculum. We would look at many different articles that brought to light other designers of color and different backgrounds that we don't typically see in our history books or in our other textbooks related to interior design and architecture and art for even art. Providing mentorship opportunities. I helped IIDA Georgia chapter. I worked with them in bringing the Black Interior Design Network and doing a mentoring program where students were mentored by designers from the Black Interior Design Network, as well as designers from IIDA Georgia chapter, so that they can also be exposed to professionals of color. And then doing the research, with that. So making sure that we're bringing to light literature that really highlights social issues, that highlights varying cultures. And so carrying that out and doing it myself. I recently finished doing a research study with Lisa over at Virginia Tech.
Lisa Tucker.
And we did a study looking at how what demographics were, looking at race and inclusion for the Interior Design Educators Council. And so hoping to really expand that to other organizations as well. But we have to have the data. you know, to see where we're at. We know that we're lacking, but we need to see it on paper. So that's one role. The other role is as the health equity lead at International Wellbeing Institute and the community concept lead there. We have recently put together, and I'm so in awe of our CEO, Rachel Hodgson, who has really centered equity and diversity in our organization. And we have created a health equity advisory that has over 100 advisors, our largest advisory to date with IWBI. And we're really looking at how we can bring forth equity in the buildings that we live, play, work, and heal. And just actually got off the call running our second meeting with that group, talking about, you know, who's doing it right and what does health equity mean and how can we create something to put forth in the market that really advances and centers that.
Yeah, that's a monumental effort, and I'm very proud and honored to be one of the co-chairs of that effort as well. Let me thank you, Dr. Scott. Let me ask all of you. You know, we're in this moment now where every organization, every entity, every firm, every sales organization, they are looking to expand their numbers, quite frankly. They are looking to become more diverse. And hopefully I am hoping that they're looking to become more inclusive as well. But how do we, right? We know as Dr. Scott invoked, that we know the numbers are dismally low for our profession, somewhere less than 5% of folks, professionals in our profession are people of color. It can't start in high school, it can't start in college. And so each of you invoked in one way, shape, or form about meeting people where they are, and quite honestly, meeting students and children. Can you talk a little bit about how early education is so critical to building awareness and opening pathways for students, and also knowing that part of our obligation and responsibility is talking about design as a viable career for everyone? I'd love to start our conversation there, and any one of you can jump in about that critical moment of meeting future designers at a very early stage.
Yeah, I can go first. I share this story a lot, but I think it just really shows how early design kind of you meet design as a person. So I grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, which is full of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. And I like to talk about this because I say that I acquired architecture. Like, I didn't need anyone special to come up to me and say, this is architecture, this is a thing. It was just, design was surrounding me and I knew about it right away. And that is a total privilege. And I think that we as designers don't understand that many people don't have that encounter with design or know that it's design. They are encountering, as Sam will, talk about a lot, design is everywhere, and they are encountering it in both positive and negative ways every single day. But there's not a name for it unless someone comes up and talks to you about it. So it's so important that people know what is designed in their world at a extremely early age.
Yeah. Nomenclature and having the words, having the lexicon to name something is so incredibly powerful. And I like the way you said that, Maya, that a lot of kids are experiencing design and they just don't have that name to give it. Sam, Dr. Scott, also knowing that in all of pipeline programs, we're not necessarily going to raise a legion of designers, are we? But if we can expose design and perhaps even the tools of design, like critical thinking and process and structure, that's good too, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going to jump in. We have a teen program, and we brought a lot of our own assumptions to it as designers in terms of like how we were going to teach design to, 14 to 17-year-olds. But to our credit, we've tried to use the design process, the human-centered design process, even in developing this program. So first step was really just talking to the kids and, learning what they, want and need. And some of them had heard about design and were excited about it. A lot of them hadn't and weren't even thinking about it as a career. But I will tell you, what they were more interested in learning about, like, key life skills around, like, how to be more collaborative, how to be better presenters, how to share their ideas. So, like, things that are part of design, certainly, but they're also as part of being a 21st century, person. If we can frame these pipeline education programs, certainly around design, but around what are those critical skills that youth are really looking for. Like you said, we're not going to turn everyone into a designer, but design has a gift to give in terms of our approach to problem solving and how, teaching folks like very key skills on how to solve problems. I would love that.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you said that design has a gift to give. What are some existing pipelines that you see out there that you're seeing as very effective? You can use your own as examples.
I would say one that I look to a lot is NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects. I think they have really been extremely successful in breaking the pipeline down and having, I think the most important thing is having support at each of those levels. And so they start with, I think a lot of you have heard of Project Pipeline for young kids, but then they have support in place at each level as you grow. And so, as you're taking your tests, there's support there with studying. And then I think there's even support if you're an adult and you are already licensed, if you need help with a situation at work or something like that. So I think they have just done a really great job of laying that groundwork at each stage.
At no stage do you feel abandoned, which is fantastic. Sam or Dr. Scott, any pipelines that you'd like to shout out?
I would say NOMA. I would also say where my alma mater, the interior design program at the University of Minnesota, my dissertation advisor created a diversity and design program where she brought together students, particularly students of color, middle-aged grades, coming to the University of Minnesota to have a full day, might have been a couple day workshop around design, where they had to create and be exposed to the principles and elements of design, and talking to different speakers or hearing from different speakers around that. I think it's really imperative to start young. And I think that we oftentimes don't understand what we have to offer people don't have to understand what we have to offer in our profession. So kind of going back to what Sam said earlier about what he was doing with really exposing these life skills to students, parents don't understand that interior design does that. Parents don't understand that interior design allows people to think critically and to really understand the world from a very different and complex lens. And by getting them to understand that and having them enroll their younger children in programs like these, I think is very imperative.
Yeah, that's great. Sam?
Yeah, I'll mention our program and another one that I really admire. So we run this program called the Neighborhood Design Project, which is for teens in Cambridge, Massachusetts, 14 to 17. Again, teaching them problem solving, but it's really a more of a service project where they're actually like learning design and applying it to a problem or challenge or opportunity they care about right in their neighborhood. And that seems to be so key that it's not just us assigning like these classic projects of like, all right, you're going to work on homelessness, or you're going to work on like, what do the teens care about? And that's where you're really going to get buy-in and for them to learn. The other one I wanted to mention was the Creative Reaction Lab with Antoinette Carroll, just amazing. Working with teens around redesigning justice and what justice even means. And I've attended also their workshops have been incredible. So learning from a teen to lifelong learning for us adults in the room.
Can I add one more?
Please.
HipHop Architecture Camp. That's another pipeline that comes to mind that's really doing amazing things with exposing younger kids to design.
With all of your experiences with education, is there a perfect age? I read all these studies that show that kids become career aware as early as age 8 and thinking about careers, right? Super early. And obviously that shifted and changed over time. There's much more exposure through media to what careers look like, feel like. Elementary schools have gotten more aggressive in career day programs. In thinking about and talking about design and exposing BIPOC students to design, is there an age that you found that's almost a sweet spot?
Oh, such a good question.
I think it's hard just because I think that there are so many ages of kids where you could spark an interest and then they could decide that they're going to pursue more things in the design space. So I don't know. I mean, this is not based on research, but I don't really like the idea of the sweet spot. And I think that we should, we do programs for kids 8 to 18. And so I think anybody in that range and even past 18 could decide that they are interested in design and decide that they're going to pursue that.
Yeah, because you can plant a seed at any point and it may not grow until 10 years later or be thought about, but that moment, right, that sets that spark. Any thoughts, Dr. Scott or Sam? What is the age range, Sam, for the programs that you do at the
we
Design
chose
Museum
teens for our this neighborhood design project, thinking about, I mean, we did do some research, but it was mostly around like when young kids are designers, right? Yeah. They are artists, they are designers. It's the fault of our systems and society and structure that's kind of, weeded out. And that's the classic, you ask who's creative, at age 6 and everyone's hands go up. You ask who's creative, at age 17 and maybe one person who takes art classes is. Yeah. So that's why we chose teens, so that you're extending that kind of childhood curiosity. Yeah. But I agree with Maya around the. I think there's always a chance to provide those opportunities. I think the key for me is more around things like project-based learning that can be applied to history, that can be applied to literature. It's just a different way of teaching instead of just lining everyone up in rows and desks and having them listen. That's not working.
You mean like the way we've always done it?
Yeah, that's just not, it's again, thinking about what can design give, that's, instead of us, I agree that we need to be thinking about a pipeline of careers, but if we think about just what can we give to society, is this whole idea of like a way of learning and doing that has a process and a methodology behind it where you can kind of learn anything through design.
I'm sorry, Dr. Scott, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just saying they're already doing it at that young of an age anyways. We're building Legos, we're building forts, we're building, ice, whatever, if we're in a cooler climate, so we're always designing. I'm from Minnesota, so I'm thinking snow forts outside too, so we're always designing and we're using critical thinking skills. I think it's really important what Sam said. We tend to move people away from that as they get older. We're all creative at heart. And I think if people, if that's celebrated and tapped into at a young age, that seed that was planted will always be there.
Yeah. But it does bring up a question of equity, in the research and content that we do around like how schools are designed or how curriculums are designed. Oh, how nice it is to read about these private schools that are doing this great project-based learning, and there's a lot of resources involved. That work has to inform and get into our public schools, in particularly underinvested communities, where just the standard ways of like, what are the egg crate schools, where we're just like in these concrete rooms and we're lined up and just listening, and we know what's possible because we can look at these models, but we do need to figure out a way to infuse that thinking into every child's education
to further incubate and nurture that creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for folks in the audience or with organizations who are thinking about crafting a pipeline program, I want to talk about also the importance of parents and engaging parents. And again, would love for the three of you to comment on engaging parents in this effort, right? We've all heard stories of people in our industry who had issues with convincing their parents that they wanted to go to design school, or were even discouraged from talking about design as a career. Yeah. So let's talk about the parental imperative.
Yeah, you're bringing back some flashbacks.
They always gave me license to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. I actually, at one point in time, I was wanted to do something that meant something, right? And so I wanted to move away from interior design because I had bought into the whole myth of the HGTV, you know, even though that wasn't around at the time, but, you know, just doing something that impacted people. I didn't think that interior design did that. My dad encouraged me to continue doing what I loved. And I think that that's really critical for parents to provide that for their kids, but also really, again, going back to what I said earlier, really understanding what design is and really understanding what it does for our lives and how it can help us to reach optimal lives in the spaces and in the environment that surrounds us. I think there needs to be we have tried to, in our profession, really kind of rebrand or remessage. That I think needs to happen before parents really truly are like, okay, yes, there is a viable career in interior design or architecture. Well, interior design.
Yeah. So I think the key is getting interior design into the STEM category, which, you know, architecture is hardly a part of. Like, I think that it's technically now an A, but that's also sometimes arts. Yeah. So for some reason, like if I sell what we're doing as STEM, I don't need to convince anybody that it's a good thing, that it's going to lead to a good career. But we're still on right on that border of not really being considered as STEM. So I think there's that, it feels like we need to show exactly what skills that are both hard and soft skills that come with an interior design or design in general career.
Totally agreed. And words and branding matter, right? So that's where you can shorthand to be like, yeah, this is STEM. And parents being like, great. Yeah, that's what I want. I want that.
Yeah.
Something
to immediately
grasp. To just get through that barrier. I mean, what we've done is we have an exhibition that we created called We Design, which celebrates BIPOC designers, female designers, gender expansive. And it was designed for youth, but what I hear a lot is from parents being like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you could get paid to be a designer. The exhibition shows sort of these career paths of all these designers. And we need to elevate that as a notion that, I raised my hand. My parents didn't know that you could get paid to be a designer. And so they were very fearful for me. I had to do a lot of convincing that, it was a viable career. So if we can do that, just raise awareness that it is a career path and that there are jobs, that's what parents are, that's worried about.
That's what they're worried about. And it is often very difficult for BIPOC kids from immigrant communities, kids from who are the first in their families to go on to higher education. The parents often want their children to go into careers that are established, known, traditional, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become a dentist, become a whatever. And design doesn't enter for a lot of people that realm. And Sam, what you said is spot on, is that often people don't think about design as a career, as a viable, I'll put that adjective in front of it, as a viable career. They see design as something you can be enthusiastic about, but not craft a career around. I'm curious, Dr. Scott, with some of your students that you encountered at Georgia Southern, did you help them have conversations with parents?
I didn't. Actually, I didn't have students who said that was a barrier.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Now that might be that I'm saying that with a grain of salt because I only had a handful of students of color.
Okay.
I think that's usually the issue when you have students of color where their parents, you know, are thinking that for the most part. And that goes into a whole host of systematic issues that we can or cannot, don't want to get into, or we
Right.
can't go there. But
Right.
I didn't see students really voice that, having issues with their parents.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I know I'm seeing some things pop up in chat, and I'm getting texts from people out there who even kind of like how Sam did, like, oh, that was my experience. It was difficult, I think, for a lot of people to convince their parents when they wanted to go to design school. And I'm so glad to hear that you didn't have that experience. But I think putting in place those mechanisms that we are continually teaching ourselves and others how to articulate the value of design and what design does to advance humanity and human behavior. And the STEAM conversation, Maya, I love that ad, and a lot of people are putting in the chat using STEAM to help explain what design is, and its viability is phenomenal. What advice would you all give to groups and organizations wanting to start pipeline programs?
I would say talk to the communities first. I think it's really important for us to not push our own agenda on a group of people before we hear what their needs are. So I think it's wonderful that we should do it, that we are doing it. I think we should do it, but I think we can talk to communities to find out what their needs are in order to get people to have buy-in, you know, to send their students to those, or their children to those pipeline programs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we agreed. We did that, right? Talking to the community, talking to the teens. One key thing that we did that I'm really proud of and would be my advice is, and it's not always possible, but it had a lot of success for us, is we pay the teens. And so it's a job for them, and they see it that way, and they take it really seriously. And that's, you know, an equity thing as well. It's their time, it's after school. So it kind of is a win-win-win all around, right? They take it seriously. They're also getting, you know, they're getting paid, you know, what they consider a job. They put it on their resume. You know, it makes it very real for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would add that stipends are amazing to do, and we try to do it. We're giving stipends right now for a summer program we're doing. But I think the biggest advice I have is, like, make sure that your programming is relevant to the child, and to remember that this is not about you, it's about the kid, and it's about making their experience as great as possible. Obviously, it's a lot about fun, but it really has to, I feel like as designers, we come with our egos, and we have to be able to take those away and really provide an experience that is going to help the student get to where they need to go.
Perfect. And what about representation? What about seeing it to be it? What role does that play in your organizations? Dr. Scott, you already mentioned it, that it is important for students to see you, but let's talk a little bit about representation. And it's popped up in one of the questions that we've had from the audience, and why it matters.
Yeah, I think it's so important, especially like before the pandemic, we were going into schools all the time. And I used to be a part of this other organization that was going into schools, but it was only, usually it was white women who were the instructors, and we were going into Black and brown schools. And so obviously it was so great that these people wanted to do something good. They were doing good things, but we need to make sure that we are, you know, presenting a group of instructors that are representative of, you know, America, or of the student group that you're going into. So just being really, really intentional about the people who you're bringing into a classroom is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. We have a layer of mentors. So these are, you know, so there's the teens, and then there are these mentors who are usually either college students or just graduated, and they are paid as well. And we prioritize recruiting BIPOC mentors so that the teens are working directly with, people that look, sound like them. It's
Like them.
so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to add to that, just going back to the classroom, how vitally important it is to see representation in the textbooks that we have for our students, not only for students of color and marginalized students, but also for white students.
Totally.
So that they have that understanding that there is value in all different cultures and backgrounds, and that we all can celebrate each other's accomplishments. I think that having someone look like you, especially when you're the only one or two people there, it kind of helps you to keep on going. I've had many students of color who come to my office and confide in me, not only about things that have to do with their school life, but also in their personal life, because they feel that they can relate to me. And not just Black students, Hispanic students, Asian students, because they feel that they have a level of comfort and that I could understand them in a way that some professors may not. I'm saying may not because that's not necessarily true. But having that, being able to feel like you can trust someone who is in your institution, who is a professor that you can go to, I think helps you to get through such a rigorous curriculum that we have anyways in design school.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just share another story on that, the curriculum.
Please.
It's one of my favorite interviews I did on our podcast. Was a young man from the Caribbean. He was an architecture student at Wentworth Institute of Technology. And he said it just happened. One of his classes focused on Caribbean architecture, and the affiliation and connection that he felt in that moment, just like Angie is saying, like, he's like, I'm in this and I can do this. And that's so meaningful. We are studying Western European design for way too long. There is so much to celebrate and so much vibrancy that we could really redesign these curriculums from scratch and totally change the game for these students.
Yeah, design is not just a Eurocentric pursuit,
Right.
but that is the perception. If you look at a textbook, if you often look at a classroom, and that validation of seeing yourself reflected in a curriculum, in a textbook, in your educator is so incredibly powerful in it, and we can't afford to forget about that. We are about to move into Q&A. This moved really, really quickly. And there are a lot of questions about how should we in crafting programs. And I want to make sure that we get to those. But one of the questions from the audience, what are some strategies that we can use to help university administrators to enhance the marketing of interior design programs? So this kind of goes back to just visibility period for interior design. So this person is asking strategies to support universities in promoting and marketing interior design programs.
I think one of the things that you have to have representation. And I think one of the barriers is, going back to this pipeline conversation, is that there's not that big of a pool when it comes to professors in interior design education and architecture education. And so I think one of the things that we talked about, I was on the diversity committee for the IDEC. You guys, excuse my son, excuse me, he's playing video games. One of the things that we talked about when we were preparing for their national conference was looking at how we can look at hiring practices and the requirements that are there for hiring practices. We make it very hard for people outside of interior design who may have adjacent skills that could be applied to interior design, specifically in the social sciences, to possibly get a job in this field. And I think if we thought about maybe opening that up more, we may see more people of color being qualified to work in these positions.
Great. Sam or Maya? And if not, that's okay.
Yeah, I'll take the doctor's orders on this one.
Yeah, perfect. Question, and this ties in, I kind of have two questions that tie in together. One of them has to do with how we talk about ourselves as designers, that we often don't promote the best picture of design, in that we talk about how little we're paid and how overworked we are. So we may need to think about, kind of all of those things in context, but how we also brand our own profession. And then
wouldn't it be so much better to actually improve all those things, and so that our brand,
those things,
is,
so
we don't have to like talk about it differently. We can actually, we haven't gotten to like, how do we actually fix,
like, make
industry?
it true,
yeah.
so that we
Maya,
can.
your point around like, do we want to be sending these youth into our industry?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's tied to one of the questions. I mean, do we believe that the low starting salaries of this profession often deterred diverse candidates or diverse students from pursuing a career in design?
Yes.
Yes.
So changing the salary structure, but also not celebrating overworking, the long hours. It almost feels like in design, there is this celebration. We talked a little bit about it pre this program, but almost a celebration of the overwork. And it often messages or brands us badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, to me, it starts in education, those like long studio hours, and how we just value our time. Like, we got to figure out how to value our time better. Sorry, Angie, you're jumping in.
No, I was gonna say the same thing. It's almost like you got to pay your dues. If you haven't done that, you haven't paid your dues. And I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to being healthy and balanced and get sleep and, being able to function. We're working, I was gonna date myself and say we're working with X-Acto knives. We have, that's over. But I would much rather see that valued over this, go, you're up all night. We're creative thinkers. And if you don't have that well-being intact, you can't think. You can't come up with these wonderful, great creative ideas as well as you would. And I think we really need to consider that, starting with our students and creating a culture of health there.
Yeah, because design doesn't have like a right answer, right? So you can just keep going and going and going, but we have to figure out a way to value our time and figure out when it's good enough, for the professor, for the client, what have you, and be happy with that.
Yeah, and there's a difference between a rigorous design education, and sometimes the flip side of that analogy is it's almost like people talk about their undergraduate design education as a hazing. And it isn't that. It shouldn't be celebrated by how it negatively affected you. It should be celebrated by how it positively affected you. How can our audience and designers help BIPOC high school students understand and know their options for college and for going into design? We often hear at IIDA from a number of people who are introduced to design and think that their route is going to a community college. And then they discover that there is a Pratt or a Parsons or a University of Cincinnati. They often discover design because many programs don't recruit at all high schools. But how can we help students understand their options for higher education and interiors?
Yeah, so I would say that what we're doing is we are exposing young people to their options. And that is really it. Like, we're not trying to produce a bunch of interior designers or architects. We are trying to show kids that there are many options. And I would put it out there that we should also be saying that going into the design field and becoming an interior designer is maybe as valuable as becoming an electrician and going to community college or becoming a welder. And I think that messaging is super important because some people might get paid more quickly becoming a welder than becoming an interior designer. So I think that it's so important that we, again, it comes back to that ego thing where we need to truly understand what is going to be best for the student. And sometimes that is not going down the pipeline.
Right.
And so we need to be prepared to give students all of their options. And that includes things like community college, because that is a valuable and important option as well.
Absolutely.
I want to jump in here and talk about just awareness on a college campus. I taught sustainability at Georgia Southern University, and I would take my students. We have sustainability week there. And so we had the opportunity to gather in the rotunda and present our projects to the campus, to the student body. And many times we did a project on biophilia or biomimicry actually, and I had my students make boards or create interactive, activities to attract people in. And we would time after time hear students say, we didn't even know that interior design was on our campus. Right? What? So there has to be an awareness. I think when we're doing recruiting, we need to be talking to our registrar's office. We need to talk to, when we're going into high schools, what careers are you presenting to students? Why isn't interior design a valuable and a viable option that you are presenting in front of them? Are there interior design representatives who can really speak to what that is? When I was in that position and went out to recruiting activities and really started talking to parents, which is another way to get parents, into this, they were like, wow, we did not know. And we're going to actually change from nursing and move into interior design. So I think really that awareness and really understanding how academia works and making sure that our profession is represented at that level is important.
That's a great point. And that's where student organizations play such a large role. So campus centers for IIDA and ASID, the Industrial Design Student Organization, NOMA has a very large and robust student organization, AIGA as well. And I know that on a number of college campuses that they don't allow them always to bear the names of the organizations. And sometimes it's a generic student design organization, but still, again, having that community of student designers is really important. What's next for you all? What are you excited about? What's next for your organizations? Let's talk a little future talk.
Boy, could really go in so many directions.
Go for it.
Around this particular topic, I would say we're very focused on how can Design Museum be a platform? How can I basically, give this, as a predominantly white organization, like being very real about that, and how can we hand over our platform as much as possible? I mean, a good example, I was at the visual aids. We just did a special issue of our Design Museum magazine about the intersection of design and policing. And it's all writers, contributors, artists of color. My team knows that I'm like a perfectionist on our magazine. I had nothing to do with this issue. I said, basically, tell these stories, important stories. And we paid all the contributors. So as much as possible, I'm trying to, that's sort of like external stuff. Internally, stuff that we've done, and I've seen some of the questions, I can't help but look at them, around completely redesigning our hiring practice from the ground up to value lived experience. And I can go into all the details around like what that means and how it's worked for us, because it's been great. As well as including like our board of directors as well and how we recruit there. And then the other thing we've done recently, and it's very important, and I'll challenge every firm leader on this call, is to enact salary transparency so that everyone can see how much everyone makes. If that gives you a shudder of fear, then I wonder how equitable your salaries are. So that's like your first signal. And then the second step you should take after you shake off that fear is the best disinfectant is sunlight, and putting out that salary transparency leads to conversations and leads to change. And again, if you're feeling some fear, that's probably because your salary is here and your underlings are here. And by the way, those are women, people of color who, and that's what's leading to a lot of exploitative practice. So these are all sort of external, internal things that we're doing. We did the salary transparency thing. I think it was one of the best things I've ever done as a manager. Not easy. I won't pretend it was easy, but one of the best things.
Okay, so damn, Sam. And you got like, there's all of this reaction out there to salary transparency, like boom, somebody posted.
Yeah.
You gave me goosebumps with that, but
it's a lot, and I'm proud of the work, and I'm proud of the impact, and you can see the change that it has in our organization for sure. So again, I'm happy to, anyone wants to reach out and get into more details of like how and why and what that means. I'm happy to talk about it because I just think it's so powerful.
That's like a whole new program.
Yeah, that's the next episode.
Next episode is salary transparency.
Yeah.
And I love that you issued a challenge and a call to action to firms out there. Thank you for that. Dr. Scott or Maya, I'll let you, what's next? What's in the future? And if you've got a challenge to put on the table for firms and designers, as Sam just did, please go for it.
I do. I'll first start with, I am really passionate about HBCUs.
Thank you for that.
I am a part of the Women of Color design group, and we had a conversation at the last meeting around HBCUs and what we can do as people of color to really lift them up, bring design programs, interior design programs to HBCUs, because there's only about two, one at Howard and one at Morgan State. And how we can support, what does that look like? Are there any hybrid programs that we can help put together? So I really am excited about starting that conversation, really getting moving. And there were a lot of people who were interested in talking about that. I know that there are people who have talked about it in the interior design profession. I really, really think that it is important for people of color, specifically Black people, to lead that conversation.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I am very excited about and ahead is the research that I'm doing around race and ethnicity, diversity and ethnicity, with that study I mentioned earlier with Dr. Lisa Tucker. Because as you said earlier, Cheryl, we don't have the numbers in interior design. Mm-hmm. Architecture has done some studies, but interior design has not documented that until we did that study for the Interior Design Educators Council over this summer. So that was the first one. And so we are looking to expand that. So I'm very passionate about research, and I am really excited about moving forward with that. The last thing is my work at IWBI. I am the community concept lead, so I have this ongoing responsibility to make sure that we are talking about social issues in the built environment, and that is part of the standard that we have with the well building standard. But the health equity activity initiative is just, I love, love, love. All of the things that we have been talking about are coming together in this group. You have the opportunity, so challenge to participate, to be a part of this advisory. We are still taking applications. We want to make sure that all voices are at the table, whether it is a student, whether it is a CEO. We recently launched our landing page, or have our landing page up and live with all of our advisors on there. And I almost cried seeing all of the different races and backgrounds and levels and titles that people are coming from, that are on this advisory. And I would hope that we are creating a model for other organizations to follow, not just in the standard world, but organizations at large. Yeah. So very excited about that work.
Thank you for that. And it's beyond a standard, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's behavioral and what we should all be doing. Thank you for that, Dr. Scott. And Maya, what's in your future? What are you excited about? What are you optimistic about? And if you've got a challenge, throw it out.
Sure. Let me do my challenge first. So this is kind of a challenge, but I think that we would solve some of the world's most pressing problems if we just created designers who cared about things. And that's not that easy to do, because the entire system needs to be overhauled. So I guess my challenge is like, do something in your firm, even if it's a small thing. It could be just an everyday thing where you go out of your way to volunteer or give money to one of these pipeline programs. There are so many that you could give to. Maybe go to your firm leaders and tell them that it's important to you to have equity, an equity plan at your firm, and organize with your colleagues and make things happen. So I guess my challenge is to do something, and there's a lot of talk, especially going on this past year, lots of statements going out, and I still haven't seen that much action. So action, that's my challenge.
Yep.
My very exciting news that we haven't totally made public yet is that we are opening a permanent space. I just signed a lease, and we're gonna have consistent programming for kids ages 8 to 18 after school, weekends, summers. So, you know, I'm hoping to go full-time. I'm still not full-time, still working part-time. But we are doubling down on the in-person after this really long year. Kids really need a place to go that's not work, or not work, they don't go to work, it's school or home. And so that's a really exciting kind of dream of mine that's happening very soon.
That's excellent. Excellent. Brava, Maya, brava. And to each of our congratulations, and to each of our panelists, challenges issued. I hope there's a lot of challenges being accepted amongst the audience. To each of you, thank you so much for all that you are and all that you do, and especially Maya too, for challenging us to put our beliefs into action. We've done a lot of talking, but let's do something. And something popped up in the comments, let's design and live like we give a damn. So thank you all. Quick plug for our next episode. We touched a little bit on it. It's going to be about decolonizing the design curriculum on July 29th. So hope to see you all back. Thanks so much to the audience. Thanks so much to the panelists. Everybody, stay safe, stay well, stay strong, stay optimistic. We'll see you soon.